Disclaimer: the purpose of this video is to point out the increasing popularity of fascist ideologies within the Attack on Titan fandom. In no way am I attempting to diminish the atrocities completed by real-world fascist organizations by comparing them to this fictional one. Floch is one of the most controversial characters in Attack on Titan. Most people hate him, as they should, but there are a few people that like him as well, and for the wrong reasons. Liking him for being a well-written character is perfectly acceptable, but what's not acceptable is liking him for his ideologies. I've seen an increasing number of people online saying they agree with Floch or they think he's doing the right thing for the island, even going as far as to say they would do the same thing in his shoes. This is very concerning, as Floch and the Yeagerists in general are taking actions that could easily be categorized as fascist. I think the main problem is that a lot of Floch fans don't really see his actions as fascist, or they don't understand what fascism really entails. So today we're going to break down Floch's actions throughout Season 4 and explain why he's bringing the island down the road of fascism. As always, if you like the content, be sure to subscribe. Now let's get into it. So what are the signs that someone is going down the path of fascism? Well, according to the National Holocaust Museum, there are 14 signs of early fascism, the first of which is powerful and continuing nationalism. This can be seen in almost every real-world instance of fascism, very prominently in the Axis powers and the alt-right of the United States. Nationalism is often defined as a more extreme and dangerous version of patriotism, which is often defined as the love for one's country. This is a trait we can see from Floch over the course of the raid on Liberia. He openly kills innocent civilians and considers the indiscriminate damage done to Liberia a huge win for the Eldian Empire. This is a prime example of nationalism, as it takes Floch's love for Paradis and turns it into something much more dangerous and aggressive. We also know this isn't new behavior for him, as John says this is something he's been saying for a while. Another sign of nationalism is when a nation becomes exclusionary or isolationist under the guise that their country is superior to others. Obviously, the island is forced into isolation by the rest of the world, and I don't think that makes it inherently fascist, because they didn't have a choice in the matter. But becoming isolated because they're the only place left to live after the rumbling, that's a different story. I don't think I really need to get into why destroying the entire world for the safety of a country is nationalistic. So we're going to go on to the next point, which is a disdain for human rights. I don't think Floch necessarily has a disdain for human rights, but he definitely has a disregard for them. He openly wants to kill civilians in Marley, saying that it was something that they needed to do, because it is something that Eren did. He is also more than willing to kill anyone that opposes the island, from the volunteers that helped build Paradis to a couple of 12-year-olds. This urge to kill those who oppose the island can easily be interpreted as a disregard for human rights, especially in the case of the volunteers, as they were basically given the ultimatum to die or live in submission for the rest of their lives. Following a disdain for human rights, the next point is the identification of enemies as a unifying cause. I think this is a pretty applicable point. Floch views the entire world as enemies of the island, and as such he uses them as a method to keep the Yeagerists under a single unified cause. The world was undoubtedly a threat to the safety of the island earlier in the show, but the main time that he starts using this language is after the rumbling begins, and at this point the rest of the world is at the mercy of the Colossals. They aren't exactly a threat right now. This means that Floch is most likely using this language as a way to reinforce the ideas into newer Yeagerists, because if the rumbling fails, he thinks they will need to follow this ideology again. The next sign is supremacy of the military. I think this one is pretty applicable to the island, but not the Yeagerists or Floch directly. The island military succeeded in a coup 4 years ago, and there are very few things that scream military supremacy than a military coup. We can also see the island making strides to create weaponry that is on par or better than the rest of the world, but it's hard to tell if this is an aspect of fascism that Floch directly agrees with. I think Floch's concerns with the military might of the island start and stop with the rumbling. The next point is rampant sexism. I don't think Floch supports this, but it is hard to tell because there are like 6 women in Attack on Titan, period, and we rarely see Floch interact with them in the first place, which I guess is a bit sexist in itself, but I don't think there's a large enough sample size to make a definite call on this one. The next major point is controlled mass media. This is another one that I'm not sure Floch is 100% in favor of. I think in Season 4 the media generally supports the Yeagerists, as the Yeagerists did leak some information about Eren to them. It is likely that the Yeagerists and the media have a close relationship, as that is the easiest way to get the pro-Eren propaganda to spread, but we have no confirmation of this, and we have no direct evidence that this is happening. However, it is safe to assume that the media played a huge part in spreading the ideology of the Yeagerists to everyday citizens. The next sign is an obsession with national security. This one, yeah, it's pretty obvious. A major part of the Yeagerists' ideology is the protection of the island from foreign threats, and using the rumbling to do so. Floch takes this even further by threatening to murder anyone that isn't from the island that opposes the Yeagerists. National security is an interesting topic for the island in general because of the position they are in, but I don't think it's controversial to say that the Yeagerists take it just a little bit too far. The next two signs of fascism are the intertwining of religion and government and the protection of corporate powers. I don't think either one of these are really relevant to Floch or the Yeagerists. We know that at this point the Church of the Walls is basically defunct, and we don't really get to see a ton of how business functions on the island. The only time we get to see any businesses interact on the island is with the Reeves Corp in Season 3 during the Revolution, and a little bit of this guy from Annie's OVA. Either of these are after the rise of the Yeagerists, and we don't see enough of them to determine if they are protected or not. The second to last point I want to dive into is the suppression of labor powers. This is exactly what we're seeing now with Floch's treatment of the volunteers. The volunteers are a major reason that the island is in the position they are in today, and I think it's safe to say without them, Paradis would be in a much worse position. Now, Floch wants these volunteers to basically act as indentured servants, and is willing to kill any of those who oppose him. I think this is a very literal interpretation of the suppression of labor powers, as in most cases, suppressing labor powers most likely means suppressing the working class or the ordinary man. Activities such as union busting or allowing wages to stagnate are common practices in suppressing labor powers. These are not taking place on the island as far as we know. The next point is a disdain for intellectuals and the arts. I don't really see this, other than Floch's disdain for Armin, but I get the feeling that's related to something else. And the final point is an obsession with crime and punishment. We've already covered a few examples of this in some other points, so let's just do a quick review. Trying to throw 12-year-olds out of an airship, killing any volunteers that oppose him, punishing Marley and citizens for the crimes of their military, and giving the cadets the ultimatum to join the Yeagerists or die. A lot of the signs of fascism are applicable to Floch and the Yeagerists, which makes sense. These are signs that a country is moving towards fascism, or is already fascist. It makes sense that they would apply to the group of people and the leader of that group. You can't be a leader of a fascist organization without being fascist yourself, especially since Attack on Titan makes it very clear that this ideology comes from Floch, as we just explored. I hope this helps to shed some light on the fascist ideologies that Floch and the Yeagerists employ. Fascism is once again gaining popularity among young people, and I think it's important to call it out when we can. Remember that fascism is not a healthy ideology, and liking it does not make you edgy or different or cool. That's it for this video. I know it was a little bit weird and I kinda took some risks on this one, so please let me know how you liked it in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to subscribe as well as check out the Discord and the Patreon. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you Monday for yet another breakdown.